Okay, so I thought I'd actually start with my first interaction I had with you a couple years ago, which I don't think I actually met you in the setting, but you were there. We were at a fundraiser in Milwaukee a couple years ago, and you were there, and Mayor Johnson was there, and Senator Baldwin, and Representative Moore, and a bunch of donors and other things. And it was at the Third Street Market Hall, and a bunch of protesters ended up coming in and were kind of causing a ruckus, and it was a little bit like, obviously that's part of democracy, but it was loud and disruptive, and nobody was really sure what to do, and they were kind of backing people into a corner, and everybody's like looking around, wondering what's going to happen. And you just must have made the executive decision to get up there, and you were like, hey, this is what's going on. We understand why you guys are here. Democracy is messy. We are not on board with what you're upset about either. We've got to figure it out. But this is a private thing. We need to make sure people are safe. I don't know exactly what you said, but you basically addressed both sides. Everybody calmed down. I felt like I could exhale and it was all good. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to, like, in that moment, I felt better after you did that, and it seemed to, like, make everybody feel better. And to your point about starting the day off good every day, it seems like you are that kind of person. Like, you're always the mediator, making sure things are good. You're pretty level-headed.
Yeah.
Do you get stressed out, or how are you like that?
Well, I think that everybody gets stressed out, including me. And I think, but for me, when I talk about every day being a good day, or you probably hear me say, I bring my own weather wherever I go. Right. And I think that we have a responsibility as community leaders, elected leaders, no matter what capacity that you are in leadership, to make sure that you're bringing a level of comfort, and bringing that level of comfort makes you have to be in uncomfortable positions yourself. And when I think about being a county executive, like, I don't get the opportunity to just talk to people who think like me, or talk to people who only want to see democratic ideas. There's so many different, perspectives that we need to have at the table. And I think that what we have lost in the world is the ability to have difficult conversations. Right now, we're demonizing individuals if they think differently from us, not understanding how we can incorporate those ideas into something even broader, something even better that benefits everyone. And so for me, it's always about trying to find common ground, because I truly believe that we agree on more than we actually disagree on when we think about us as people taking politics out of everything.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, a lot of the conflict is people just wanna be heard. And I think seeing that scenario play out, that was exactly what was happening. They did just want to be heard and acknowledged, and even just taking the few minutes to do that seemed to, in that one micro moment, like, that was good enough for that moment. It didn't fix all the problems, but they were heard.
And that's important. It's about acknowledging people's existence, acknowledging the voice, and we have to do that. We have to do that a lot more.
Yeah, taking each other and each other's fears and struggles seriously instead of assuming the worst right off the bat.
There you go.
There's a lot of talk about experience in this race. There's a lot of candidates with varying levels of experience, which I think is actually pretty cool as voters to kind of look at the different perspectives of candidates in this race. And we'll get to like the actual work experience, and I do want to get into that. But before we do, I kind of want to get into your life experience a bit, because I actually think when we're talking about somebody at the level of governor, the person who's going to be in charge of the state, in politics, I don't feel like we talk enough about, how somebody's life experiences shape them to be ready for a big moment like this. And I know you in particular, at a time when everybody's trying to be so buttoned up and, making sure they have the best story and that they're only highlighting the good things. You don't shy away from your life experiences that some people might think of as a negative, but you don't seem to think of it that way. I mean, you talk about growing up in Milwaukee in poverty and being evicted and moving from house to house and having parents that struggled with mental health and addiction. And as somebody who's overcome addiction myself, I actually feel like that's one of my best superpowers and strengths now to do what I do. How do you think your life experiences have made you ready for this moment?
Wow. Well, once, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
And I think that when we think about our life experiences, it really helps to understand the foundation of an individual, right? And so, yes, I mentioned like my father being, a master electrician. My mother was a Jane of all trades. They did everything that they could to take care of us, but they still had their own challenges, right? But I would say that when I think about the challenges of being evicted, seeing my mother and my father go through the things that they went through, whether it was substance use or just anything health related, one, I think that teaches us about resilience. When I think about where I come from, growing up in the 53206 zip code, one of the most incarcerated zip codes in the entire country, nobody thought that a kid who grew up in poverty, who grew up around substance use, could become the youngest and the first African American elected as Milwaukee County Executive. Heck, I never even thought that. And when I think about my own experiences, it's really about understanding that you have to keep people centered at every discussion, right? And so, you know, because of my housing instability, we've been able to invest in affordable housing. We have the lowest unsheltered homeless count per capita. Because of my experience, and not just with my parents, right, but other family members, neighbors who lived on the same block as me, seeing them struggle with drug use. Now we've been able to invest in opioid uh, addiction and treatment and prevention and all these things. And now we've seen a 40% reduction. And so when I think about my background, it has really given, I'm tested. I'm grounded because I know where I come from. And because of that strong foundation of who I am, I think it's important to share that with folks because I want folks to know that there's a lot of opportunity out there, right? And what you went through, your experience, how you grew up, your zip code should not decide the type of future you should hold. And that
Mhm.
we have the ability to take the bull by its horns and do whatever we want to do, but we have to be authentic. We have to be genuine. We have to be honest about where we come from because that is our foundation. And I believe that, no one should run away from where they come from, right? You should actually double down because it helps you to understand where you're going, where you're moving forward. And that's also why I say every day is a good day, right? Because I also know what I've been through. And I know how bad it can really be understanding where I come from. And so I use that saying as a way to manifest a good day, as a way to encourage other individuals. And so my background is who I am, but it doesn't define who I will become.
Mhm. And I'm sure gives you a new level of empathy to relate to those dealing with all these different types of struggles that so many people across our state are dealing with. And I know, obviously you're Milwaukee County Executive, you grew up in Milwaukee, and some people think that there's some very unique challenges with Milwaukee, and there are. It's our state's biggest city.
Yeah,
However, I also think there's a lot that folks struggling in Milwaukee have in common with a lot of the folks struggling in our rural areas, which I don't feel like gets talked about enough. Like, yes, they may on a day to day basis, their life might look a little different, but they're dealing with a lot of the same problems. I mean, do you feel like your experience and the adversities you've faced is helping you connect with folks in those more rural areas as you kind of tour the state and talk to people?
absolutely. We know that the opioid addiction is not just affecting urban areas, it's been ravaging rural communities all across our state and all across our country. When I travel across the state as I'm doing the campaign now, and when you're hearing about affordable housing being one of the top issues, and I've been in places like Waukesha, one of the reddest places where they know that housing is extremely important for them. And so it does allow you to connect. And when you think about those who are struggling, right? Those who are receiving the services and the programs, those are the individuals who's also had the biggest barriers and challenges of actually navigating the system. And so it is extremely important to me that when you have those conversations, you're right. You heard me say this before. No one cares what you know until they know how much you care, right? And when you're able to build that relationship with the individual, right, you can develop trust. The policy conversations, the solutions become that much more easier. And when you develop that trust, those who are directly impacted by the issues, they feel more comfortable actually lending their voice to the solution. And you want them to have a seat at the table because those directly impacted, they have the best voice when it comes down to solutions. What will actually work for them? And and I also understand when they say that, well, people don't understand us because they see a lot of elected officials who come from different backgrounds that they have, may have, was born with a silver spoon in their mouth, but don't really come down to the ground level, come down to the neighborhood level to have these tough conversations in order to make sure that we're delivering the results. People don't care, about what is happening in the world. They want to know, what are you doing for them? And the only way to do that is by meeting the folks where they are. And so, you know, I've been able to make these connections all across the state of Wisconsin, and it's been interesting because once talk about my background, what I've done as Milwaukee County executive, people are like, "You're really impressive," and I appreciate that. But I also want folks to understand that, like, I'm not just doing this for me. And like as a leader, if we're only doing things that's going to pad our resumes and it's not helping, others rise to the top themselves, and we're not bringing others along with us, we're doing ourselves a disservice. And so when I think about Milwaukee County and what we need to do, I know that it's not just about my community because we rise and fall as a state. And so the better Milwaukee does, the better the rest of the state does. But it's also important that we lock arms with all of our local brothers and sisters across the entire state and give all of our children and our families an opportunity. And the only way to do that is not by looking at each other as our different neighborhoods and our different counties. We have to look at ourselves as the state of Wisconsin, as one Wisconsin, as we begin to really develop the policies to make sure that when the tide rises, all the boats rise.
Well, and speaking of that, talking about the people on the ground and them feeling heard and seen. I know last week you were endorsed by Block, which is Black Leaders Organizing for Change, which is run by Angela Lang here in Milwaukee. And they are just an absolutely powerhouse, incredible group doing such great work, engaging folks, especially in the Black communities here in Milwaukee. And as one of the most segregated, if not the most segregated cities in the United States, having a dedicated organization like that, doing that year round organizing and really talking to people, making sure they feel heard is so important. And so, me as somebody who's watching what's going on in politics in the state all the time, I'm always looking to like Angela Lang and I'm like, where's Angela's head at? Because she knows where everybody else's head is at. And I think that endorsement was a pretty big deal. What does that mean
Yeah.
to you?
I mean, it means a lot to me. One, what I appreciate about Block is that they're doing organizing all the time. They're
Hmm.
really bucked up against the system because, people ask the Black community to come out during elections, and then they come out during these elections, and after the fact, the folks are nowhere to be found. And I love the fact that they continue to do doors, knock on doors, educating people on the issues, but more importantly, bringing the solutions to the table. One of my favorite things to do with Block is their silent canvas. And it's also one of the hardest things, right? Because, I am the county executive. A lot
Hmm.
of folks know me. And when I'm just sitting there being quiet, it's just like, well, you're not going to say anything, but
So
it
you're
gives,
going door to door with them. The organizers are talking, and you are not
yeah,
allowed to
yeah.
talk.
Candidates are not
That's a
allowed to.
fun game.
It is. But as an organizer, right, even myself, that is my foundation. You have to listen first. And so it means a lot to be able not only to have, you know, a Black organization supporting me, but a progressive organization that understands the need to raise the minimum wage, that understands the need for criminal justice reform, that understands the need to make sure that everybody gets access to a quality education. And so, I appreciate the endorsement, but it's also validation. It's validation on not just what I'm bringing to the table when it comes down to this governor's race, but because I'm the only executive in this race with a track record of delivering results, it's validation that I've been doing the right thing in my own backyard that's helping, communities of color, that's helping women, that's helping our disabled veterans, that's helping our seniors, is helping our young people. And to have that recognition from a reputable organization like Block means the world.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of door knocking and open canvassing, and I've been in different areas, and I have talked to a lot of voters in those areas, and I know, you know, they feel really disenfranchised a lot, and often don't want to vote because even Democrats a lot of times will come back to the convenient policies, and they feel like not much really changes. So I do think it's significant that they are putting their trust behind you and saying, okay, well maybe this will be different, and that's based on not just your campaign, but like you said, the work you're already doing.
Yeah,
They're able to judge something in real time and say, "Yeah, yeah, we're good with this. Let's take it up a notch." And I think that's really cool.
it is cool.
Um, what do you think most people don't understand about some of the challenges that our state's biggest city is facing?
Yeah. A lot of people don't, and let's just face it, like for the past 30, 40, 50 plus years, Republicans here in the state of Wisconsin have been focused on the urban rural divide. And they've really honed in, particularly on Milwaukee County, because then I would argue that, the lightning rod, the political lightning rod we're under in Milwaukee County isn't partisan. We get it from Democrats and Republicans. But I also understand that, right? Because I've actually had to challenge my cabinet, our leaders, that we have to become uncomfortable too. We can't just sit here in our own bubble and think that everything is hunky dory, right? Like, we got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And you can't talk about being the economic engine of the state without beating on your chest. We do this in partnership. But we also have to be honest about the realities that we live in, right? And so when you're representing the largest community, you're going to have challenges related to crime. You're going to have challenges related to disparities in income and housing and education, you name it, right? I mean, years ago, Annie Casey Foundation said that Wisconsin was one of the worst places to raise a black child, right? And so we have a lot of challenges. But when I see all of these challenges, I also see untapped potential. I see so many different opportunities for us to think outside the box, think differently, and really challenge the status quo, right? And so, like, being in this race is not just my frustrations with the Republican Party and who's occupying the White House. I have levels of frustrations with the Democratic Party as well. You know, I am a county executive. I don't have the luxury of only coming from an ideological corner, right? I have to talk to different perspectives, different, communities, and especially when you think about communities of color, there's a wide range of folks on the political spectrum. And
Right.
so it's extremely important that when we talk about the challenges, right, that there are some that are unique to Milwaukee County and, being in large urban communities, but there are also a lot of similarities in rural and suburban communities across the state of Wisconsin, housing being one of them, the opioid addiction being another, criminal justice reform, right? Climate change, right? The flooding is not just affecting urban communities, it's affecting agriculture, it's affecting our farmers. And so when I look at the challenges, I look at these as opportunities for us to create greater opportunities of partnership. How do we collaborate and really bring our heads together? Because there are some best practices that we can put in place that may not work for a Barron, that may not work for a Rhinelander, right? But if we're able to share those best practices, how do we put our heads together? How do we sit at the table and actually tailor, right, these best practices to fit each community's needs? I represent 19 different municipalities. There's never a one size fits all solution for the entire county, just like there's not one for the state of Wisconsin. And so we have to allow more people to be at that table to help massage these ideas that's going to fit their community, create more buy-in, and that will actually work and create sustainable outcomes moving forward.
You're my county executive. I'm all the way out in the suburbs. So I think even within Milwaukee, it's not like you're just the city of Milwaukee. There are already many different types of demographics that you are responsible for representing. And so, okay, moving into your role as Milwaukee County executive and what that experience means in this race in particular. It's arguably, I mean, the most relevant experience to governor, right? I mean, you're already managing all of the people in the county and the budgets and everything going on. I believe this is the path that he who shall not be named also took to be governor,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Um,
I'm not like him.
so no, I know. What do you can you talk a little bit about your leadership style and how you feel like you would carry that into being governor based on your experience being county executive?
Well, I guess I would say it's three things that my leadership really focuses on. One, collaboration, right? I don't think that one person, one individual entity can actually move the needle, make sure that the tide rises to make sure all the boats rise by themselves. And so you need to make sure that you're partnering with other groups, with other entities, with other individuals, and to make sure that you're not only doing the right thing, that there's a level of accountability, but there's enough buy-in for us to make sure that we can actually do this work. Because we're talking about elections, right? And when you think about elections, everything is happening in 2 to 4 year cycles, which stops us from actually creating those long term opportunities, those long term planning and the goals that we need to have. And so it's always about collaboration because I want this work to continue, even if I am not here. But it also has to be people centered, right? If we're not bringing more people to the table, then they're on the menu. And when people feel like they're on the menu, then they don't have buy-in. They don't believe in the goals. They don't believe in the objectives that you're trying to reach. And so it's extremely important that you have everything people centered, keeping people at the at the forefront, right? And not just thinking about, political decisions, because we have a lot of people who think about politics itself, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're like, "Oh, we need to change this because the polls are saying something differently." That's not how I operate. And so I am people driven, but more importantly, it's also about giving people opportunity. And when I say what I mean by that is I don't make decisions in a vacuum. We bring as many people to the table as possible. When we worked on our first strategic plan within Milwaukee County, the first one in over 20 years, we built it on 3 pillars. And the first one was intentional inclusion. You know, my cabinet, has had, more people of color and more women than any other county executive in the past because I wanted to make sure that we were representing the community. And so my leadership style is making sure that we're rising more voices. It's not about me at all. This is not about my resume. This is not about how I'm padding my resume for the future. Because if I'm doing great, but others aren't doing great, I'm doing my entire community a disservice. And so I want to make sure that as I move up, I am bringing others along this journey because I need to make sure that the baton can get passed and we're being intentional on how we're doing this work moving forward.
Here's an interesting question. Based on leadership style and all of this and working with other people, what do you think people might not understand about being a Democrat in a role where not working across the aisle is not an option?
I think, that is it's like being between a rock and a hard place when you're in local government, especially as a county executive, right? Because you have, Milwaukee County, we have strong Democratic strongholds, but we have other communities that are strong Republican strongholds or very independent. But when I think about my leadership style, it's about making sure that there's enough seats at the table, right? It's not just about diversity when it comes down to age, gender, socioeconomics, and who you love and where you come from, but it's also about diversity of thought. And I do believe like this is how I've been able to build my success because I think because of those relationships, trying to understand who individuals are, it has allowed governing to become, I'm not going to say easy, but it's become more collaborative. And so, you know, I'm always going to be, always going to lead with humility, but I'm also going to be genuine. And I don't believe that having multiple voices at the table means that you have to compromise your values or your ethics or your morals, right? But we should be compromising when it comes down to the outcomes that we're delivering for the people that we represent. When Democrats win or Republicans win or whoever loses, the only folks who lose are actually the people that we represent because we're looking at how do we win as a party versus how do we win for the people that we represent. And so as a county executive, I don't have the luxury of leading from an ideological corner. I focus on what's best for the people because people don't care, especially in local government, if you're a Democrat or Republican. They want to
Yeah.
know, are you fixing the damn roads? They want to know, are
Yeah.
you fully funding the public schools? They want to know, are you investing in public safety, investing in mental health and healthcare? Those are the things that matter. They don't care about this process or what side of the aisle that you're on, especially in local government, because we're closest to the people. We are responsible for delivering those outcomes. And that's how I lead. I focus on those outcomes because they don't care about the process. The process is just getting too deep into the weeds. They want to know what have you done for us. And and that's why as county executive, that's why we've been able to be successful and even getting suburban communities, right, to even have more affordable housing opportunities because we tailored those projects to fit each community's needs. We brought them to the table. We didn't say this is what we're going to sell you. This is what you have to do. We created collaborative opportunities for that. And so I just lead with humility. I lead with people being genuine. And, again, it goes back to my favorite quote: no one cares what you know until they know how much you care, because people don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They want to know what are you going to do to benefit them.
Well, and I also think, going back to what you said about like you need to be willing to get uncomfortable to have those uncomfortable conversations. Um, i- if you're talking about something like affordable housing, you can't fix that in 2 years or a 4 year term or even 8 years. That's something that is like you have to build systems for that may take longer to really fix and really sustain. And you can't just talk to people you agree with to get that done, right? I mean, you're gonna have to be talking to different types of politicians and community leaders. And I think maybe what some people aren't understanding is I know everybody's really excited about the potential of getting a Dem trifecta, but I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves because even if we get that, there are Democrats in the legislature who represent very purple areas, and they have like farmers and rural folks with unique needs that aren't necessarily just we can't count on their vote for every progressive policy that we want to get through. So there's going to be negotiations that need to happen, not just with Republicans, but with skeptical Democrats or more independent minded legislators as well.
Appreciate that point because, we can get the trifecta and we can do everything in the next couple of years, but how do you sustain that power for Democrats moving forward for decades is what's important. And so I truly believe that we have to be extremely bold when it comes down to our agenda, but we can't be stupid, right? And what I mean by that is that, we can't be stupid to where we're not putting ourselves in place to where we're going to have Democrats in rural communities being represented, to where we can't be in power when it comes down to 2030 and making sure that Democrats are in the driver's seat when it comes down to the census, when it comes down to making sure that we actually have fair maps here in the state of Wisconsin. And so we have to make sure that we are actually planning long term. Our budget cycles are 2 year living documents. But those 2 year living documents is the reason why our schools aren't sustained for the next couple of years, why our school districts are going to referendum, why we don't know how we're going to invest in healthcare and childcare and all these different things, because there's no long-term plan that we have put in place. And that's what's going to change with this administration. With my administration, we're going to be talking about how do we create a strategic plan, not just for the state of Wisconsin, but also working with the party about what we need to do as Democrats moving forward when it comes down to messaging, when it comes down to winning elections, but more importantly, passing policies that benefit everyone in Wisconsin.
One of those issues that I think is misunderstood is the public schools, and a lot of what we hear about, especially like online, is like that it's a very black and white issue. It's like we can't do vouchers anymore, just public schools all the way. But in Milwaukee, in particular, I mean, I think Milwaukee was the first city in the U.S. that really rolled out this school choice program, and so, what are you hearing from folks there and just your experience of growing up in Milwaukee and being there that maybe people need to understand about that whole public school versus private school conversation? And maybe it's like a reform part of it.
It is absolutely a nuanced conversation. What many people may not know is that, particularly in the city of Milwaukee, half of the students, 50% of the students actually attend the voucher system. And so even if you got rid of that system today, all those students will be going back into Milwaukee Public Schools where they don't have enough dollars and resources for the current capacity of students that they have. And because of the way that we fund our school systems, right? Voucher schools get money in real time. Once that third Friday count comes, they get that check in real time. Public schools, they don't get that check until the year after, right?
Oh.
They don't get that money until the year after, and so, that's which is a huge problem, and so we absolutely need to make sure that we're holding, these charter schools, these voucher schools accountable. We need to make sure that they're transparent and they're held to the same standards as our public school systems because you're comparing apples to oranges, and this is really what the Republicans have done the past decade is created the shell game and how they've been able to put dollars, into the charter system without any real accountability. And so, but let's just face it. I mean, we've seen that with the school property tax credit, where they're saying we're investing in schools, but it's going towards property tax relief and never hitting the classroom at all. And so we have to take a step back. We have to change the status quo. We have to make sure that we are actually putting a school funding formula that actually allows school districts to actually plan long term for the future versus budgeting every 2 years.
That's like a beast of an issue that I know is there's no small or short answer for it. And it's everybody's gonna need to work together to figure that out. Okay, let's move on to Tom Tiffany for a second. Okay, so the one thing you may have
At
in
T3,
common
as I call them.
T3?
Yeah, Time Terrible Tiffany.
Oh my god, I love it. So the one thing you may have in common with him that you guys talk about is that you're both girl dads. However, I would argue that he has made taken some pretty terrible votes for a girl dad that are really putting women in this country and in this state in a really tough
Yeah,
position, whether it's on repo right, lots of things.
yeah.
For you, how does being a girl dad and all the care and the worry that comes along with that go into the policies that you're prioritizing and the world you're trying to shape, the Wisconsin you're trying to shape for a better future for your daughters and all women in this state?
Well, one, I love being a girl dad. You know, I grew up in a household where I had two brothers, so I'm the middle child. I had two brothers, so I know exactly what my mother was going through when she was raising boys. And being the only male, like I love it. But you know, I'm also afraid for them when I think about the future, their own future, right? And so for me, I am a champion when it comes down to reproductive health, when it comes down to abortion. When I served in the state legislature, I actually co-authored legislation declaring abortion as healthcare. And when I think about where we are in this country, I want my daughters, 18, 9, and 6, I want them to have the exact same rights that their grandmother had, right? Not less. And that's where we are in this country, right? I want them to get equal pay for fair days of work, right? I want them to have more access to opportunities than I ever had. And I think right now, because of this Republican agenda and this Trump agenda, that they will never have the same opportunities unless we actually step up as Democrats, and more importantly, step up as constituents, as residents, and as voters here in this country. And so it's extremely important to me that I continue to fight on behalf of their future, fight on behalf of, you know, all the individuals who require access to comprehensive reproductive health, right? Because it's extremely important. And I would say that what helped me early on is that it was during my organizing days, in high school when I was first introduced to Planned Parenthood. Matter of fact, right when I was first on Badger Care, or it wasn't, I can't say it was Badger Care here in Milwaukee County, we used to have GAMP. It was called the General Assistance Medication Program, where they provided insurance through the county, and my first primary care doctor actually was the Planned Parenthood that is on Fond du Lac in the city of Milwaukee. And so
Mhm.
that was my introduction. And so understanding how important these services and programs and information is, we have to continue to double down and not allow this Trump administration or any Republican to destroy what we have on the books. We absolutely need to ban this dumbass law that we've had here in the state of Wisconsin when it comes down to the abortion ban. And we need to enshrine reproductive health within our Constitution to make sure that we're protecting women's rights moving forward and in continuity.
Yeah, and I think people really need to understand the contrast of Tom Tiffany might be trying to be like the supper club guy with the old fashioned, oh, no big deal. But I mean, the fact of the matter is he agrees with the 1849 abortion ban. He does, he's signed on to a 6-week ban. He has extreme views in this area and would be very dangerous handing over the reins of the state to him to see that through.
Oh, it'd absolutely be dangerous, and it would be irresponsible for us to allow it to happen. And that's why we have to organize, right? We have to bring awareness. And I always say we need the three T's in order to defeat T3, right? And the three T's is the time, the talent, the treasure, right? We need to win Democratic seats up and down the ticket, not just in the states, but across the entire country. We need to flip this Congress in order to have some level of a check on this executive branch at the federal level. you know, but it's also important that we are thinking long term. Like, how do we make sure that we are building back not just better, but with more resilience to make sure that these institutions, the laws, the policies that benefit so many people in our community don't ever see a wrecking ball coming through those doors again. And so like we have a responsibility.
Right. And well, and speaking of opportunities, I know that's one of like the core pillars of your campaign and kind of the last one I want to talk about here. Why is it important for you to highlight that specifically at the highest level of like these are the three things I really want to fold everything under? Do you think you can establish what do you think you can establish those systems for people across the state that actually build up better opportunities for them and fight back against the narrative that Democrats sometimes have to deal with that these things are handouts. What do you want to say in terms of like the policies you're prioritizing and where you want to invest and how you want to build out those systems so that people can build a path to prosperity for themselves
Yes.
and thrive?
Well, we need a plan. Let's just be honest. Like,
Yeah. Step 1, that
like
would be
we just
good.
have to have
Yeah.
a plan. Like,
More than a 2-year plan. Yeah.
yeah, and right now, you think about where we are in the past couple of years, we've only been responding to Republicans. We've only been responding to Trump. And I think that is giving them more fodder to define who we are as Democrats versus us defining who we are. And now I'm not saying that we should not be standing up, but if we are not communicating what we are for, it's going to be hard for us to bring people to the table, right? I don't want people just to be rallying about what we are against. I want people to be excited about what the future holds for Democrats, what the future holds for the state of Wisconsin and this country. And, people talk about, well, these are just handouts. Well, if we've been spending too much money already on what we're providing, then we're definitely not doing any damn thing for families moving. We haven't done any damn thing, to be quite honest with. Education is not a handout. That's the greatest economic development tool that we have as a state and as a country by focusing on our greatest commodity, our young people, making sure that we have an educated workforce. They're the ones who are going to be creating, going to be inventing, going to be innovating. And so it's important that we invest in them, but public transit, right? That investment is not just an investment in making sure that people can get to and from work or to their healthcare appointments and, be able to, experience different communities, but that's also how we save our environment, right? That's also how we, reduce the amount of pollution that we're putting into the air. That's how we have access to clean air, but how we also have, access to clean water and making sure that we're holding people accountable and things of that nature. And so, for me, without talking about opportunity, we're missing out on defining the future that we want to have here in the state of Wisconsin. And
Yeah.
opportunity is education. Opportunity is healthcare. Opportunity is childcare. Opportunity should be given to everybody, regardless of what zip code, their background, or their income.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot with childcare specifically, and we are coming up on this funding cliff where these funds are going to run out, and childcare centers will have to either raise rates or they will need to close. And that we know that what's going to happen with that is that women will need to leave the workforce. And that's why, this investing in opportunity, investing in childcare is not just for the people with kids, it's to keep incredibly qualified women in the workforce contributing to our economy, and there's always a bigger picture here. And if we want to talk about handouts, I would say maybe all the tax cuts
Tax
that
breaks.
the Ulines are getting, I mean, that's where the handouts are going, I think. And so potentially that's a bit off balanced, and maybe the next governor can kind of balance that out a bit more. Okay, so as we head into this next month, it's going to be key for this race because I know the primary is August 11th, but mail-in ballots are going to start going out. Gosh, end of June or early
Yeah.
July. So it's like it's coming down to it. It is crazy the conversations I'm having with people, just outside who are still haven't really looked into it much. If they're just coming across you now, what do you want them to know about you and why you should be considered as their choice for governor?
Well, one, I understand the frustrations that they have because it doesn't feel like government has been delivering for them. And right now, we have an occupant in the White House who is only focused on division and distractions. And it's been hard for families to focus on what's important to them because the target is always moving. Something is forever changing. but, my campaign is really about bringing stability back into the state of Wisconsin, making sure that when the tide rise, all the boats rise, that we're listening first, that we're collaborating and partnering, and actually listening to those who are directly impacted before we start not just passing laws, but implementing those laws, because we need people to be a part of this process, from the start to the very end. And so I want people to know that I understand what they're going through. I've been through what many of them are going through. And as a county executive, we've been able to tackle many of these issues that people have long for so long have said we'll never be able to do this. And I think we're at a pivotal moment right now. We need you. We need you in the workforce. We need to provide you healthcare. We need your children to get a better education because we need you to live a prosperous life in order to make sure that Wisconsin is the best place to raise a family. And the more and more that we can invest in the people right here in our own backyard throughout the entire state, doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter who you live, it doesn't matter what your income is. We need to make sure that we are creating opportunities. And so this race, it's not about me, it's not about my family, it's not about my daughters or my wife or, this is about all of us. This is about making sure that we are creating the type of future that everybody wants to see. We are creating the opportunities that every child deserves to have. And so I'm running to be a governor for all of us, and it's going to take all of us in order to make it happen. And as an organizer, I'm going to continue to travel across this state. I'm going to always be comfortable being uncomfortable, because we are going to have to continue to lock arms and making sure that we are not just fighting back, but that we're fighting for the most vulnerable people in the state of Wisconsin and across this country. And so I'm looking forward to everybody getting involved. I'm looking forward to people casting their ballot, whether it's for me or not, because democracy is a full contact sport. You can't be on the sidelines. And if you are on the sidelines, don't come back complaining about what the results may be, right?
Right.
We need you.
And I think we need each other. And I think, you are the kind of
Well,
leader
I
who
need them
I
too,
think
because I need to,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you, see your policies, volunteer, see if maybe you're coming to a town near them?
Yeah, so folks can visit my website. We do have events page up. You can follow us on all the different social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. I said Twitter,
All
X,
the things.
Facebook.
Yeah, I know. There's like 100 now.
And the handle for that is Crowley4WI. So please visit, follow, share, donate, whatever you do. Keep doing everything that you can to make sure that we're moving forward. Just like Dr. King said, right? If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving forward.
David Crowley, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.